Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series, Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. In this series titled Success Looks Different, Shane Fast of Renew Painting will be discussing his surprising journey from ministry to painting and the many lives he has impacted, lessons he's learned, and counterintuitive approach he has taken along the way. It is a 6-part series. In episode 1, Shane discussed his unlikely path to painting and his bold vision for the future. In episode 2, Shane covered initial hurdles he faced, both personally and professionally, and how he overcame them. In episode 3, Shane dived into his decision to professionalize and scale and the action steps that allowed him to do so. In episode 4, Shane laid out Renew's Painting's core values and how those impact every aspect of the business. In episode 5, Shane walked through his counterintuitive approach to hiring and sales and the hedgehog and flywheel his business run by. And in episode 6, the final episode, this episode, Shane will break down his transition to a hybrid model as well as his vision for the future of Renew Painting. If you want to ask Shane questions related to anything in this podcast series, you can do so in our exclusive Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook. Just search for Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook and request to join the group. Or type in the URL facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. Again, that URL is facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. There you can ask Shane questions directly by tagging him with your question so you can see how anything discussed here applies to your particular painting company. What's up, Shane?
Hey, brother, how are you?
Doing well, man. I'm excited for this final episode. It's always bittersweet. You know, it's usually a really compelling episode when we wrap up these series, but it's also sad.
Yeah, it's been fun to I feel like we've gotten to know each other a lot more through this process, which has been awesome. So,
Yeah, I've loved it, man. So we've gone through a lot. We are now covering your transition to a hybrid model, vision for the future. I'm thinking the transition to the hybrid model maybe makes sense to run through first. What are your thoughts?
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, so kind of a quick backstory on that is for years I would I was starting to hesitate on these words, but I think I can use them. I would almost look down on the subcontractor model. Not in a way where I felt more prideful, just where I looked at it. So maybe look down is not the right words, but it was almost just this negative view of it.
I mean, I don't
Uh,
think that's super uncommon for companies that utilize W-2. I feel like it's like they think there's an abdication of responsibility or potentially lack of quality control.
Lack of culture, yeah, and potential lack of culture,
Mhm.
some of those things. Just kind of like, hey, are we just, and also our desire and vision for impacting people. I felt like, well, you don't really impact people. You just hire them to do a job. And so, I'm just absorbing these informations. Probably at this point, have gone through what's this year, 2025, 3 expos. I've been to 3 expos, interacted with a number of different people. And last year, 2024, in January, we had I think 8 W2 painters and one kind of project manager in training who is still kind of on the field, kind of managing projects. We were kind of, growing. And office manager myself. So we had a lot of in-house painters. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of stress because, last year especially, we saw a contraction at the beginning of the year. January and February are always lean months. December, you kind of have that December through February lull where, about the time Thanksgiving hits, you better have some work already sold because people don't want you in their house, decorating over Christmas, all that stuff. Beginning of the year, they start to think toward budget, but don't quite make that call to make the move. Or if they do, they're thinking, oh, let's do this in February, March. So pretty typical, right? It was the first time we had that many mouths to feed, essentially.
Mm.
and saying, hey, our pledge is that we're going to provide work. So we've got to figure this out, you know? And so it was just a really stressful hustle. And, and that was a big challenge. So that, take that data point and just kind of pencil it over here. The other thing that started to happen was, we let one person go just to kind of like we started to realize the little character insubordination type stuff. One person moved to Florida, say, hey, we just need to get back home. We're homesick. So there's two gone. One person we realized we knew had some OCD, diagnosed OCD, and we thought that we just kind of realized, hey, this is going to be this is you're not thriving here, essentially. Like you can't shut it off enough to just kind of get the work done and move on. And she didn't feel like she was thriving. We didn't feel like it. So that was a really hard conversation because she's last year, literally, I was walking in physical therapy 3 months after we let her go and gave each other the biggest hug and smiles. I mean, so it was good terms, but it was like,
Sure.
dang, that sucks. That's one more person. And then we're doing a quarterly review, and our longest tenured employee we realize is probably a better fit in a factory because he just wants to do the same thing every day, all day long. And that's not what we do. And so through tears, I say, man, I have loved watching you grow, and part of your future growth is going to be outside of us. So now all of a sudden we're down to four, pretty quickly. So that was by August, we're down to four in-house painters. So um in the meantime, over the summer, starting in like May, I looked at our project manager and said, we've got too much work sold to produce. We can't do it because we had slowly started to lose people, right? So we started trying the subcontractor route, and it was messy at first, because you have to try people. You're learning how to do it. I talked to people and figured out, here's how you do it. Here's the best way to, figure it out and set it up and this, that, and the other. But you've got to try them out, and that's the hard part is can they actually do the job to the same standards? And so it was definitely a bumpy road for a couple months. And then eventually we found a couple teams that could do the work consistently and do it well. And so by September of last year, we're pretty much running a full hybrid model to where as the months progressed, our subcontractor revenue outpaced our W-2 revenue. And at this point, we have three full-time in-house painters, two project managers, and a team in teams of subcontractors. And so that it's really been a thing where it wasn't exactly it definitely wasn't what we were planning on. Being a part of the PCA, being connected to other painters, uh, showed me that the subcontractor model is not bad, that it's not selling out, that's not, that there's a lot of good qualities to it. And so when it kind of happened to where we had to do it, that's kind of how we got there. And one advantage of it has been, remember that data point about last January and February. So this year in December through February, when we were able to just tell our subs, hey, this is a slow time of year. We might not have as
Sure.
much work for you. And that's kind of the reality. We'll do everything we can. And by God's grace, we still stayed pretty busy, but it was a little bit slower during that time, naturally, than it is now. But we didn't have the same level of stress having to keep three W-2s busy versus nine.
Yeah.
And that was a big relief that allowed me to enjoy my life a lot more.
Yeah, I love
So,
that, man. So let
so
me, I kind of want to dig in.
a lot
I
there.
mean,
Yeah.
to the I appreciate all that. I want to dig into the transition. So I want to get really tactical here because you said, all right, we wanted to go from W-2 to subcontractor. You had kind of a mental block on it for a long time, didn't feel like it was the best option. Decided to make the leap, and then you said it's messy for a few months. Had to try out a bunch of subcontractors, kind of figure out how to do this. Let's dive into that. So
Yeah.
if I'm coming to you today, I have a painting company, I'm all W-2, or maybe I'm just starting out. Maybe I'm actually the painter out in the field and I'm thinking, hey, I want to use subcontractors. I just want to go that model. What would you tell me to do?
I would say you've got like our job costing wasn't set up for subcontractors. It's our spreadsheets. So I wish we'd have just taken a step back and recalibrated them more quickly. So that would just make that process easier because we need to have a system for that, right? Um, that's one thing. So do our systems set up for that? Are we set up for that on our work orders? And so are we ready mentally to say, hey, like we use Paint Scout as our quoting software and that
Love
produces
that.
work.
Love Paint Scout.
So, so yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal tool, right? So are we ready to take that work order, send it to the sub? Or do we have a plan for communication on the job site? All of these kind of nuts and bolts. So whatever that looks like, I mean, so our tech stack now is, and this wasn't what it was when we started. And part of the reason that is this now, I'll say, is because we realized we needed to spend more to have a bigger tech stack to make this work. We have Paint Scout. Monday is our CRM and our project management software. So that takes it in all in one. Comes in there, stays in there when a job's sold. There's a Zap set up that spits it onto a project management board, and our project managers, we all dialogue in Monday about the job. Some people use Slack. That's a really good tool as well for that in terms of job site communication. You just don't want it on text because you just don't like
Yep.
at the end of the day, you don't want a bunch of photos coming through text and a bunch of notes about the job coming through text because there's no clear documentation, right? So we want to keep all that in Monday. And Company Cam is the other thing we invested in late last year to say, okay, I'm gonna get over myself and realize that I've actually got to spend money. So let's get Company Cam. We also got Hey Pros to work with a subcontractor. Um, I think it's a good tool. I would say that is it necessary? Absolutely not. For us, I felt like I've got two very young project managers, and I want to give them as many resources as I can to communicate with subs and to set prices. One of them is a 22-year-old. They're gonna try to beat him up on price, right? So
Sure.
I knew from the jump, if I'm gonna bring Nate into this role, I need to help him out. And so we invested in Hey Pros for that reason. That was one of the huge drivers. Now it does a lot of other really cool stuff. I think it's a great software. I'm just saying there are multiple ways to skin this cat, I guess is what I'm saying. Whether it's
Hey
Hey
Pros
Pro,
is it's a software for basically performance pay, right?
no, that's I don't know
That's
which
something
one that one
else.
is, but that's not it. Yeah, so Hey Pros is strictly a subcontractor management tool.
Got it. Okay.
So it's how we go in there, we set here's the address, here's a Paint Scout work order, here's a company cam links, and here's the price, and we send it to a sub. So whether it's, let's just say John, Bob, Billy gets whatever, they get the thing and say, hey, you can book it, or you can say this doesn't work for me and we'll hire somebody else. But that way you kind of agreed upon price up front, they can invoice through it. So it does help a lot of those back in those communication pieces. Um so I'm trying to think. I think that's the end of our tech stack. Besides, we still use, Google Sheets for job costing. There's still nothing better for that. Just set up. We have one that we get through our coach, and we personalize it from there, and we can see all the metrics and everything we need. So I would just say that you've got to have that tech stack really clear, so that your communication, your documentation, your management of those subs, all of that is really clean and crisp. Because we were kind of flowing with, yeah, we texted him this work order, we communicated this, and you sent us picture. Everything was all over the place,
Sure.
and it was really hard to just get our hands around exactly where things are in our process. Um, the other thing is that that leaves no room for miscommunications at that point. You have, hey, you had the work order, you had this, and now we have subs that actually say, hey, I didn't see that on the work order, and so what they're saying is more money, right?
Sure.
But I love that they're reading it, so they're now reading the work orders and saying, hey, did you quote that? Because is that in the price? Because it's not written down. And so that's where you want to get them to. So the more you can develop some consistency in how you're managing them, I think they like it. We like it. It just helps everybody. So that's, I think that's the biggest thing, Brandon. Finding subs is really challenging. Our, big help we've had is we hired a Hispanic project manager. So he's very, he's bilingual. And so that, in our area, there's a lot of subcontractors are Hispanic, not all, but a lot. And so that's been a huge help. Um, Trying to think of some other stuff.
I mean, this was, I do have a couple questions for you, Shane.
Yeah, go for it.
So you talked about job costing not set up for subs.
Yes.
So how's it
So
different?
our sheet, sorry, there's a truck driving behind me. Our sheet was really exclusively designed for W-2s. So, the way it tracked the who's the painter, how many hours do they work, what's their, hourly rate, plus the employer burden and all those kind of things. That's how ours was set up. It wasn't set up for we sold the job for $10,000. This is what the materials cost. This is what the labor was for the sub, all those kind of things. And so we had to essentially just recalibrate uh the entire sheet. But I mean, Chris with Elite Business Advisors has already done that. We just, we had to just abort that sheet and switch to another one, I guess. So
Got it. I want to specify too, correct me if I'm wrong, but for people listening, employer burden, that would be things like payroll, tax, right? There's Social Security, Medicare, everything like that that you're going to have to cover on
absolutely.
top of payroll.
Yeah. That's just FICA, that's Social Security, Medicare. We also calculate our workers' comp and GL into our
Got it.
labor rates because that's essentially what it costs me to, if we pay somebody $30 an hour. Second. Sorry, I'm right by this. We're doing this big new
We can't,
commercial I talked
we
about,
actually
and
can't hear it.
okay. Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
That
You're
lets
good.
me not worry about it anymore. All right. Thank you. Sorry. We calculate the workers' comp and the GL into that because those are typically a metric of your payroll.
Sure.
And so anyway, that's also an important number for us because I want to that to me that kind of comes off the top versus later saying, oh, well, I pay this in workers' comp and GL, and at that point I haven't accurately job costed my actual job, because
Yeah. I
that's a
love that.
proportional rate to the employee. So
Yes. The finances are super important. And we find that a lot of painting companies, unfortunately, don't have that dialed in as much as they
yeah,
maybe should. And then they're wondering where where the money is at the end of the year, or
right.
kind of surprised by the tax burden that they're maybe carrying. There's all kinds of financial implications of that, obviously, oftentimes underpricing projects because they think their gross profit is higher than it is, especially if they're doing the work. If they are the project manager or a painter and they're not
That's right.
essentially accounting for paying themselves for that work, there's a lot that goes into that. But I think when you switch from W-2 to subcontractors, not having that employer burden, I mean, I look at that as an additional 30%. Might not be quite that high, but it's pretty high.
What do you mean in terms of
So
just
if you're paying someone, let's say, 50 grand for the
yes,
year, I'm going to go ahead and allocate 30% on top of that. As just
correct.
kind of a rough back of the envelope metric. I'm going to assume that they cost the company 65 grand.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think if you're not kind of analyzing numbers like that, you could miss things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then that's where when you get into we evaluate our in-house jobs and our subcontractor jobs. For our project managers, they actually have different goals depending on those jobs because we know our in-house and everybody's different. I've talked to some that say, "Hey, we make more money margin wise on subcontractors than we do in-house." We have a really good in-house team, and so we make really good margins on our in-house work compared to subs, 5 or 10% more, sometimes 15 on average. So
Wow.
they're just that. I mean, we only have three right now, and they're that good. They've been with us for a few years. I know the systems. We know what jobs set them up well. Then that's the other thing about a hybrid that's fun is I know what our in-house crew is going to thrive in, and I know what our subs are going to thrive in. So at this point, I don't put my in-house team on a $30,000 exterior and bury them for 3 weeks there. We're going to put them on. We've found actually that having that in-house team to go hit these $2,000 jobs. Even sometimes, like I got one scheduled for Monday, it's $1,100 job, and that sounds like some people have minimums much higher than that, and that's fine. But we know that $1,100, we're going to make really good money on that with that in-house team. Revenue per hour on that's going to be well above our charge rate because I know exactly who's going in there and how fast they're going to crush it. And the second thing is that I know that customer is going to call us for a bigger job later. They've got a whole exterior, they got dental molding over the whole thing. That's going to have to be painted at some point. And when we do that, we're going to send a sub team to do it. So um, it's given us a lot of flexibility. But yeah, our PM targets, our project managers targets for in-house team are 50% or higher on gross profit, and with subs is 45% or higher. And that 50% on the W-2 side already includes all that employer burden. So that's already taken out. So they've got to hit that 50% with the employer burden accounted for.
When you say 50% and 45%, are you also accounting for the estimator for project manager for everything?
Yes and no. I mean, part of the reason we have those numbers a little higher is because we are kind of accounting for those people, but that's going to kind of shred off of that number. So as we whittle from that 45 or 50 down to the net profit, they're going to come off of that. So I guess the answer technically is no.
That's what it
Yeah,
sounds like. If
yeah, if that makes sense.
yeah,
But the reason we set those a little higher is because we know what those numbers generally are,
sure.
if that jives. So
That does
yeah,
jive.
our estimators and PMs have a base plus I mean right now I am the estimator, but we with the job description and the comp plan for the estimator PM, they're the exact same. So it's a base plus percentages based on how much they manage. Up to 1 million is a certain percentage. The next quarter million, the next quarter, they get higher percentages. So
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think as at a minimum, the commission, whatever commission is being earned by either the estimator or the project manager should be accounted for in the gross
yes.
profit. But then companies, I've seen companies do it various ways. If there's a base, whether or not they want to kind of divide that across cost of sale or view that as overhead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the commissions are generally going to eat between 2 and 3. I mean, they've got to really be doing over 1.5 million to get much more than 3.5%, of that
Sure.
next level. So let's say you had sales and PM, that's, you on average 4 to 6%. So, when it rolls off of that, and because their bases are not extremely high. So
Sure. So we'll look for maybe 40, around 40% for the subs all in and 45 for W-2.
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
Got it. One
that's
of
right.
the other things, Shane, you mentioned with you, one of your hesitations switching from W-2 to sub was culture. Has that been
Yes.
negatively impacted?
No. It's actually been it's been really fun. So I'll give you an example. One of our specialties is cabinet refinishing. And so we had a cabinet refinisher call and want to be a sub. And at first I just said, we're not even going to talk to her, we'll call her back and politely say no. But in talking to her, I realized this person knows their stuff. Let's kind of try them out. So we tried, we brought Pat in, we tried out on the job, kind of just say, let's find a daily rate, work with Tanya, on this and our cabinet refinishing side. And it became really apparent really quickly, she's good at what she does. And so she does do a few other jobs during the year, but I would say if there's 52 weeks in a year, let's say she takes off 3 weeks, that puts us 49. She works for us 40 weeks a year at
Mm,
minimal. And so she's pretty much working for us almost exclusively, right? She comes to our Christmas party. She comes to certain event. I mean, she's part of our team, and we've been able to positively develop that relationship with her in a way that is, so for us, as long as a sub reflects our core values, then they can be a sub. And
sure.
they can be, painting partner is what we'd rather call them, right? But for the purpose of this podcast, we use subcontractors. We don't want to confuse anybody, but we like that term painting partner because we really believe we're partnering for the growth of your company, for the growth of our company, and more importantly, for the good of our clients, right?
I'm glad you said that though, because I think that's a valuable piece of information for people to hear.
The just a
Yep.
categorization. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lexicon of a company is really important. What words do you ascribe? Words are powerful.
Yeah, we feel like that really we want to link arms, right? And I've had great conversations with subs to say, oh, I'm just gonna fire this person. They're not doing. And I said, yeah, you know what? I've had knee-jerk reactions too. Let's talk about this. Let's process through it. Let me tell you some of my story, or I just want to do what you do and not be on a job site all day, every day. And I say, look, there's still projects I've managed and I'm still on job sites. And I've done this since 2016 and it took a long time to get here, so don't try to run before you're even walking. And so to be able to kind of have these conversations and invest in people, and as far as yeah, so I'm skipping ahead a little bit to the other concern I had, which was can we actually invest in people at that point, right?
Sure.
And we talked on the flywheel last week. You know, that's where we're still learning on the contractor painting partner model. How does that work? And there's limits to that legally, obviously, that we can and can't do. That being said, we have found that we can really invest in these men and women. We can invest in them as people. We can invest in their businesses. We can, help them think through problems, and we can invest even tactically sometimes. Like, hey, I'm seeing you're doing that. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? Yeah, we can't legally train them, but we can sure talk about methodology and we can learn from them. And I think that's where our culture has been improved as we've even had our in-house painters and our subs on the same jobs together at points because they're just so big and say, hey, we got to get all this done. And that's been really fun to see them interact together and our culture rub off on the subcontractors in that way as well. So I think it's been surprising how much, I'm trying to find the word, confluence, or it's just kind of come work together
Cohesion,
real
maybe.
well. Maybe cohesion's a word, yeah, and something about us rubbing off on them a little bit,
Mm.
to where, Pat would say, man, I am Renew Painting. Yeah, I might not officially work for you guys. I don't want to technically work for somebody else, but I like I'm all in, and
Love that.
so it's this cool synergy that kind of happens.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you said one of the other challenges, which is a challenge for a lot of companies, is finding subs, finding reliable subcontractor crews. One of your
Yeah.
advantages is you have a Hispanic project manager, bilingual, so that person, I would imagine, sources a lot of your subcontractors. Are there specific areas from what your PM maybe sources, whether it's Facebook groups, next door, just people that they know in the community? What does that look like?
Yeah, and I'll say this is very fresh for us because he's been here. This is third week, so this is very fresh. But it just a week though.
So you must
You,
have found them somewhere else first.
so what's that?
You must have found subcontractors somewhere else
Right,
first.
right. So I was going to touch on that. Yeah. So I would say in his third week though, we've been able to find three more subs. So
Wow.
just because, part of it is, let's say somebody doesn't have. Here's where the language barrier gets really challenging. Well, there's two layers going on here. There's a language barrier, and then there's a minority majority minority majority thing. And I'm not going to try to make this like sociological and political or whatever, but there's a reality that in our country, being a middle class white man is a very privileged place to be. Okay, like that's a lot of our culture is kind of just set up and operates that way. And there is a reality that and I saw this play out. I mean, I spent 9 years in an impoverished community that was largely African American, and so there's a level of connectivity. Minorities connect with minorities really well, and there's a lot of reasons for that in terms of just like historical dynamics and other things. But at the very least, you look in our country, if you have an immigrant, it's like if people understand me, people that speak my same language, people that know my culture and what it was like back home, and all those kind of things, right? And I know there's a ton of different Hispanic speaking countries, but in general, there still is a level of connection there.
Sure.
And so where we've seen it be really helpful is when a sub doesn't have workers' comp, which a lot of them want to be subcontractors and they don't carry workers' comp. And that's a very dangerous thing to do, right? We see a lot of companies do it. They'll say, I'll keep you on forever. I just got to take this 10 or 11% out every single time. But you're exposing yourself dramatically at that point if you don't make them have workers' comp. And so for me to sit down and explain, hey, you have to have this, yada, yada, is a different level. One, I'm trying to translate this insurance information. Two, I'm trying to get them to trust me. So it's just been a more rapid trust, and of course, the translation is instant from Juan versus me. And so there is that reality that's been extremely helpful. Um, even communicating, and I talked to actually Matt Kuiper about this not too long ago. He is, I think they've just hired one of their first Hispanic project managers. That being said, he had a subcontractor that was Spanish speaking that he had from the time before they started Harpeth even. And so he said, if I had not had that guy, our growth would have been totally different because this person could say he could say, hey, will you talk to this potential sub about what it's like to work with Harpeth? And then, boom, they're off and running. The guy's speaking credibly about Harpeth. He's speaking the same language, and that allowed Harpeth to find more subs that way, right? So I think the language barrier and the trust there is just pretty dramatic, and it's whatever or pretty important, I guess is a better word, like the opportunity to kind of engage that way. Um, we put up as far as tactical, we're just now trying to, we've grown enough to where we said, hey, I think we need another one or two subs. Well, Juan just found a couple, so we're probably okay for a few months here. If we get more sales like we hope to, then we'll need some more. And then I think we'll go more Facebook groups and some of those other things, which I think are ways we can find them. The other way that I've heard a lot of people say is really effective is literally just to go to Sherwin in the morning when people are coming in and getting their products and just interact with people, meet them, try to hit it off with them. We did. Nate did a great job doing that and found a potential sub and went to visit his job site and everything was great. he just had a vehicle wrap and he wasn't willing to put some magnets over it and stuff to do our jobs. So that's a
Mm.
non-starter, right?
Sure.
So that was unfortunate, but the method worked. It was just we couldn't quite get over that hump. We can't control everything, right? We put up signs at Sherwin-Williams, at the Ben Moore stores in Spanish and English, looking for subcontractors. Facebook ads. So we've had some response there. Our Sherwin reps, I hear people sometimes say, "Hey, I've had great success to our Sherwin reps." We have not, and I don't think that's for lack of trying. I just think there's a lot of crappy painters out there. So we've, a lot of those referrals for whatever reason just have not worked. And so, probably our biggest ones have been putting the signs up in the stores. And these men and women going in, that's how we found Pat's, how we found Francisco's, how we found, I can give you four people that we found just because they saw the sign in the store.
And the to put the sign in the store, how did that go? Did you have to kind of speak with the store? Or what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to the store man. I talked to our rep, said, "Hey, we want to do this in every store in our area," and they, basically kind of signed off on it. And then we talked to I mean, we're, gosh, Brandon, it's such a low bar to really. I mean, you can say, "Oh, it's just about spending money." If I spend 80 or $100,000 to Sherwin every year, like they're gonna let me do it all, do a lot of different things. Well,
Sure.
it is true, but I could spend that 80 or $100,000 and be a total jerk, or I could take donuts, take pizza, take Christmas gifts, gift cards at Christmas, and we do that to the store managers and the associates every year. So we're always taking them, the managers, maybe it's a $50 gift card, maybe the associates were given $25 gift cards at Christmas, but we're doing different touch points during the year to where we're earning their trust and we're earning their favor. We're treating them with respect. We're not yelling at them if they screw up an order. I've seen some idiotic thing from Painter, just the way they treat these employees at Sherwin-Williams. And I'm thinking, that's just foolish, just treat them like
Going
humans. You
back
want
to
to
the
be treated like
partnership idea.
yeah, I mean, we really look at Sherwin and Spectrum Paints is our bin more dealer in our area, and so we look at those two as partners, and so we cultivate those relationships to where when we say, hey, we're growing, we need some subcontractors. Can we put up signs? Of course, they're thinking, well, 1 + 1 = 2. If they sell more jobs, they buy more paint. That gives us more numbers, right?
Sure.
So of course that reality exists, but I think it also helps that we have that relationship. So.
Yeah. Love it, man. So I want to transition into discussing the future for Renew Painting, and I know you have big goals, but is there anything else subcontractor specific that we should cover before we move on?
I think the last thing I'll say about the hybrid model is it gives us a ton of agility. So I just sold, I think I had two quotes Monday, 7 quotes on Tuesday, right? So of those seven, I
Yeah.
think we will, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was all, and I think we've closed 8 of the 9, actually. It's crazy, which I know people would say,
That's
that's
a
too
high
high a close
close
rate.
rate, Shane.
That's too high a close rate. But I can't, I don't know, man. Like
You're just
Hannah,
that good, man. You can't help it.
well, I've gotten really competitive lately because I have a competitive drive and somehow I have turned that into the sales drive. I work out every morning with a friend of mine who sells cars. He's in a discipleship group with me with a top realtor in the area. So the three of us are just all of a sudden, I think there's just something contagious to where
I
we're
love
not
it.
necessarily competing against each other. We're competing for our own businesses with each other. And so there's just this surge for all three of us, which has been so fun. And so, yeah, I don't want our close rate to be 90%. That's not our goal. But at the same time, I didn't give up any money on any single one of those jobs. We closed them at the market rates we want to be at, right? But the reason I'm sharing all that is to say I think that 6 of those 9 will be subcontracted out because they need to be done very soon. So part of how I closed them is I said, yeah, we can get in here next week. We can get in here in 2 weeks. We can have this done the week you're out of town because I can call them sub and say, hey, can you be here at this time? And I know we've got somebody to put in that role. So I think the agility it's given us to sell it used to be we were 6 to 12 weeks out. And that's what I just had to tell people. So if a realtor called and said, we really need this house painted so we can put it on the market, we just unfortunately might not be able to perform.
Yeah.
But now,
And now
no
that
problem.
realtor's not calling you next time. So you're,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then we're losing that relationship because they're going to have to find somebody else. As much as they might like us, they have to find somebody else and they have a good experience with somebody else. So
that's what I
now
think so many painters and business owners just in general miss is the bigger picture, right? You mentioned it with a smaller painting project, the 1100, you're going to make money, but now when they have a bigger need, they're going to come to you. I would take it a step further, being that you'll get referrals, right? If you do it the right way,
true.
You can kind of own that neighborhood if you canvas in that neighborhood. And so
Right.
there's a that $1,100 is just a foot in the door. If you say,
That's right.
hey to the, real estate agent, we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to help you with that project. Well, now the real estate agent's forced to go to another company. Maybe the other company does a good job. Maybe they now form this relationship with this other company. Maybe you just cost yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars because you couldn't do that one little project.
That's right. That's right. And whereas when we had a full W-2 model, we would bend over backwards to do those real estate jobs because of everything you just said. I did not want to lose them, but gosh, sometimes it would be painful to figure it out.
Yeah.
And now it's just there's so much flexibility in our schedule and so much ability to take on more and more work. And so, our revenue a few years ago was 600, last year's 1.1. Right now, the last month we did 200,000. So that's a
Wow.
$2.4 million company, right? Our goal this year was 1.2. So
Probably going to beat
that
that.
we said we've got a new project manager. We're trying to figure these things out. Let's set it at 1.2 and be really conservative and just try to, and that did not happen. The volume just kind of came and came and came to where we said we've got to figure this out. And so anyway, numbers are part of the story, right? They're a part of the story. They're a data point. The reason I share those numbers is not to say, wow, we're really growing, as much as to say the reason we've been able to make some of those increases is going to the hybrid because we can say yes to that job that needs to be done in 2 weeks, and make a profit on it and move on to the next one and do it again and do it again and do it again.
Yeah. I think one of the most harmful things that I hear from painting company owners, there are quite a few, kind of incorrect thinkings, but one of them is taking pride in being booked out super long. They're like, oh, I'm
Yes.
booked out 3 months. Cool. That's not something you should be super proud of. It's great that you have that business. It's great that you've sold all those projects, but that kind of thinking, and then what I've seen from those same painters is then they'll end up panicking because they're booked out for 3 months, but then maybe eventually a year from now, they're kind of not booked out at all, and it's just not balancing the ops and the sales and not having the agility. It's just not, and maybe part of it's that they're booked out 3 months, so they told so many people no that then all of a sudden they're burning bridges kind of the whole time because they're booked out
Right.
for so long. And now when maybe things get a little bit leaner, when that real estate agent relationship could have really helped, or certain relationships or referrals or repeat business could have really helped, they don't have it because they turned down work so many times.
Right. Yeah, and I would say that I was, guilty of, at one point taking pride in that as well. Like, man, we got so much work.
Yeah,
And then I started to look at and I was looking at these people that would call and say we need it done in 3 weeks, and I was like, oh, we're missing that job, we're missing that job. And then you start to realize, yeah, at some level, everybody's not going to say, oh, you've got the best quality or whatever. And I've already told you my theory on that anyway, is that
sure.
there's a lot of use quality work. So if you're going to give somebody a premium experience, some of that's going to be able to be reactive and meet their need. Because if their main need is a timeline and I can't meet it, I'm not getting that job, right? And I'm not getting that relationship. I'm not getting the referrals. And when I mentioned even the close rate earlier, all those leads weren't cold leads. They weren't just Google web searches. 5 of them were customer referrals or repeat customers. So we expect to close most of those.
Sure.
So the more of those we can have, I mentioned Harpeth Painting. They turned their marketing off because they had so much volume. And I've heard Maggie say most of our work comes from repeat customers and customer referrals. A massive company.
They're a big company. Yeah.
That's where it's coming from. That's where it's coming from. So it just shows the strength of those relationships. And like you said, like you got to keep them. And that obviously they do a ton of commercial, and so that kind of a lot of that makes it's bigger than residential in terms of the volume of repeat there. But um anyway, there was something else you said a minute. I was trying to think of how you said something that I thought was a really good point you made. Now I can't remember what it was. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we're, painter marketing pros generates leads, right? For painting company. We do what's called database reactivation. So that's reaching out to past customers, past leads,
Yes.
generating repeat and referral business. So we help with that as well. But from somebody who actually, my job, my career is generating leads, I think it is massively undervalued, not the first lead, but the second lead, the repeat, the referral, kind of owning the network, viewing these projects as just a first step. Ultimately, you're building
Yep.
an empire, right? You're building this
Yes.
network in this community. You're not, and so many painters I see it's kind of hand to mouth, right? Like, oh, where's my next lead? Where's my next lead? Where's my next lead? What about your last 100 leads? What about your last 300 leads? What about the ones that didn't close? Are you still following up with them? Do you have a CRM that's following up with them for a year? Are you calling them still, right? A month, 2 months out. Maybe they didn't complete the project. Drive by their house. If it
Right.
were an exterior project, maybe it hasn't been painted yet.
Look at it.
And
Yeah.
guess what? Every other contractor stopped after a week or two as well. So you just call them back. There's a good chance you're going to close it. What about the projects you completed? Are you following up with them, or like you said, maybe there's something else they need painted? Maybe their neighbor needs something painted. I think painting companies, they think that the homeowner's going to remember them. Homeowner's not going to remember you. Could have been the best experience ever, though. You know, how many times have we asked somebody, "Hey, who did this for you?"
Yeah.
Oh man, it was gosh, it was this. Oh boy, let me try to. Oh man, it was a great company. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. They're not going to remember you because they have so many things going on in their lives. So you have to kind of make them remember you by staying in touch with them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. And I know you guys provide a phenomenal service with that. So it's
Yeah,
important.
and appreciate that. And then I think the other thing you said meeting their need, meeting the need of time, right? Sometimes time, sometimes convenient, sometimes maybe being really attentive to the fact that maybe there are elderly people in the home, maybe kids, maybe schedules, nap schedules, whatever it is. I think so often people think, well, it's just price and quality. That's all they
Right.
care about. But the customer experience, like you said, quality is kind of the price of entry. If you can't paint, then you're not going to succeed as a painting company. There has to be a certain minimum minimum bar there. But you look at all the marketing of painting companies, what does it say? Quality. Quality. That word means absolutely nothing because there's
Right.
no company out there being like, we're mediocre, kind of
Right.
mid quality. I mean, we're not the best, but we're
Average
not the
painting.
worst. It's like sort of okay quality. That isn't a marketing message. So the quality is just you might as well just throw that word away because nobody cares.
Yeah. Our little on the back of our t-shirts, we have renew painting and then it says renewing people, places, and expectations.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
awesome.
our kind of drive is, and I straight stole that from a friend in St. Louis that had a movie actually, because I saw it on his business card. I'm like, that is awesome. And we ended up deciding to name it Renew Painting. I was like, I'm using that, because that's really what we want to do, right? Like we are trying to impact our people, impact the people we work with. We are a painting company. So we want to renew a space, like a place or a
Yeah.
space. That's what we do. But the expectations part is the experience, so maybe we should almost renewing experiences. I don't know, but that's the idea that we're looking for is people expect subpar experiences. They expect have to call their fence company 4 times like you did to get on the schedule.
You know
And
what? They
yeah,
came out, man, yesterday. So they came
okay,
out yesterday. Dude, they did a great job. The crew lead, he was phenomenal. We had a bat house that we wanted them to put up. They did. So we just bought a house and there were a bunch of no-see-ums and mosquitoes. So we put up this bat. They installed the bat house on the post.
nice,
That was kind of outside the scope, and they were super patient with us. We should have already selected the exact location of the bat house, but we didn't. So my wife and I are out there, and I'm researching, how close to a tree can a bat house be, and all this stuff. And they're super patient. They did a great job, but what a terrible experience up to that point. A lot
right,
of people wouldn't have stuck with them. I was
yep,
just desperate because everybody was terrible.
yeah,
The
right.
bar is so low.
And that's it. That's what I tell people sometimes is for a while I thought, I don't know if I can keep doing this because the bar is so low that it almost feels boring at points. And then then I really got into the business side and
It's so
realized, man,
boring to succeed and make
there's
money and change lives. What a boring thing.
well, this is back in like 2018, 19, and I was also resistant to doing it. I've talked about that in
Yeah.
my stuff. So, that's before I realized everything you just said. Like, what does success look like? How is it impacting people? How are we impacting more clients? How are, all those kind of things. Yeah, obviously that flipped a switch for me, right? So there was a lot going on, but that the low bar does exist, and our hope in our area is that there will be more people that do give people great experiences, so that everybody would raise that expectation, right? But
Yeah. 100%, man. Rising tide lifts all ships. And that
right.
another thing you mentioned was the you working out with your two friends in the morning, all of you pretty sales driven, successful real estate professional, car salesmen. Car
Yeah,
salesmen are some of the best salesmen, right? If they're good.
bro. I learned so much from just in conversation. Oh my gosh, I got to use that. I got to do this. I got to do better at this. So
It's
yeah,
tough. I mean, people who wants to go talk with a car salesman? Nobody. So you're going in. We all have defense when we go into a sales mode, right? The painters face it when you go in and
yeah,
you're a contractor and you're going to conduct an estimate. You're going to face it. Nobody faces it harder than car salesmen because
absolutely.
they're like the proverbial just worst type of salesman. So to
Right.
succeed in that game, you have to be pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I learned a ton from a buddy. I mean, he wins there every single month. He's like the leader. He's got the like dealership record for most car sales in a month, and and he's not sleazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just they have no haggle, so you can't even haggle with you can't even negotiate. They have a no haggle price setup at their dealer. You just got to win them over, and so through those conversations, I learned so much from him, and it's been awesome.
I bet he's a great listener, identifying their need and selling to
Find their
that
need.
need.
That's right. What's their
Yeah.
actual what's their need? What's their actual objection? I've learned, I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic for me to learn so much. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you saying that though, it emphasizes the importance of community. So I'm going to do a quick plug for the PCA. And anyone who's listened to me for any period of time knows I'm huge into the PCA. So PCA Paint Ed, PAINTED.org. You can go there, check it out, register if you're not already a member. We have another 4 events coming up through the remainder of this year. Really awesome events. But I think this idea of being around like-minded entrepreneurs, people who are driven, is is undervalued in the industry at large. And so with the PCA growing, and I feel like that's turning the tide. But hopefully, anyone listening, goes ahead and checks out one of those events or becomes a member.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The heard a talk from Brad Ellison a few years ago, and the only thing I remember from it really was somebody it was a Q&A. He's like, I don't want to be more than 3 weeks booked out.
Yeah,
That was the first thing where I was just like, oh, that's interesting. But it's again, I mean, I'm rewinding to 10 minutes ago, the topic we're talking about, but that's a PCA nugget. I can give you
sure.
so many little PCA nuggets that it's transformed our business.
Yeah, love it. So Shane, let's kind of shift gears here, focus on the future of Renew Painting. What does that look like, man?
It's exciting. We're having a blast and we're excited to see where it goes. We need to look to hire a salesperson toward the end of this year, early part of next at latest, based on our current trajectory. The reason I'm still doing sales is I mean it's probably the only job I would find if I wasn't doing this is kind of sales oriented. So it does fit my aptitude, does fit my wiring. Also, I want to get really good at it and develop a really good system and process that I can hand off. And
Sure.
so much of it has been intuitive that I have, we've even had processes I didn't follow because I didn't have to, right? And I would fire somebody for that. So it's okay, let me put myself in that sales role, kill this to where I can train this, right? And so that's kind of where I am right now personally in terms of like looking toward the future is I've got to nail this so I can hand it off. So I
Yeah.
can hire somebody, train them, empower them, and they can fly.
So just saying, hey, go make the sales like I did, that might not be quite enough.
Yeah. I said last year, one of the things I learned last year was that if it's intuitive, it's not teachable. So if I just do stuff intuitively, like I was doing project management intuitively, and I was trying to teach a project manager and I couldn't do it. So we had to rewind and, hey, what is an SOP for this? What happens from the time you're assigned a job to the time you close it out, right?
I love that, man. I mean, that quote is, I just wrote that down for myself. If it's intuitive, it's not teachable. So you have to actually figure out how to convey that effectively to other people. You have to systematize it somehow.
That's right. Yeah, you take what's intuitive, which is a gift of all your experiences and God's grace, right?
Yep.
Like that's great. And what's intuitive is it? I should say it is teachable if you take time to systematize it, to write it down, right? But if it's merely intuitive to me and I'm not taking that time, then it's useless to anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's what we were running into as we started to grow. Like I was a bottleneck because I'm like, yeah, just go do this, and I didn't know how I did it. I just did it.
For
And
people
so
listening to, I want to interject. Sorry, Shane, real fast. Don't be proud of being a bottleneck. You can be proud of skills that you have, right? But I've seen entrepreneurs. Well, nobody can do it like I can do it, right? Or this always comes to me because I do it the best. Cool. That means that your company's not going to. Do you want to be proud of you doing this certain thing? Kind of proud that I'm the best employee at this thing, or do you want to be proud of the business you're growing and the team you're empowering?
right, that's absolutely
All
true.
right,
Yeah.
stepping off my soapbox. Keep going, Shane.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I have seen every single turn. If you hire the right people and build the right team, when you hand them a responsibility, make it clear what you expect, make it clear how to do it, they take it, they make it better, they innovate, they grow it, they do it better than you were ever going to do it.
Yeah.
And you do that 5 times over. That's how we've grown. Is me getting out of the way. and saying, hey, we're going to hire the right people and let them fly.
Jason Paris
And when
is really
they
big
fail,
into that. Paris Painting, I think they're 14 million or whatever they're
right.
at. Olive Holdings, I mean, they manage, I don't know how much money, assets under management, 50 million maybe. And he said that the thing that he's best at is getting out of the way.
I mean, it took me a long time, man. When I was, part of my burnout story in doing the ministry, I, I felt like I could do it better. So I just still try to do everything. And
Yeah.
I had some incredibly gifted people on our team that I hindered and I frustrated because I didn't let them run, and I didn't realize I was doing it
And
till
they won't
years.
always tell you that either. They'll be reticent to say something. They might
Yeah.
not even notice it,
Yeah.
right? That
And,
how many
or,
companies don't typically empower people the way that you're talking about. So they might, it's a kind of a normal workplace.
right. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's how I was. And I learned the hard way, man. Yeah, you'll destroy yourself and you destroy your company doing that.
Yep.
Ultimately, that's where it'll end up because it's all going to depend on you, and that's going to crumble at some point. So as we look to the future, yeah, we were moving someone. Our office manager has an incredibly high ceiling. I've been grooming her to take over an operations role to where she would have all the marketing, the office stuff, the production, and all those departments, obviously under my leadership, but she's going to do it better than I am. It's that simple. Those quarterly reviews that I'll forget and we only do them twice a year, they're going to be every quarter now, if not, and there's going to be more touch points because she's going to be in charge of it. So there's a great example of me realizing I can't do it all, right?
Right.
And and so I'll still kind of have the sales and the sales team as we grow that. And commercial, we're dabbling in our first. We do some commercial repaints, some small renovations. This is our first. Hey, here's a ton of blueprints, new construction, barbecue restaurant. Give us a quote, And so it's going great. We're excited. Again, PCA. That's how I brainstorm how to quote it is through other men who have companies that have done a ton of commercial work before. We'll see if that's an avenue we continue to take, but it's definitely something that in our area, it's a very growing area and there's going to be a ton of need for it. So that could be its own division at some point for us. We're realizing that, as I suspected, it's probably its own animal in terms of sales, in terms
Sure.
of marketing relationships, in terms of quoting it, in terms of producing it. It's its own animal. So I think it's its own line of business. We're not there in 2025, but we're experimenting in 2025 so that going forward we can learn, yeah, this is how we will need to do this.
I think it's important that you note that, right? That hey, this is going to essentially be its own division. Because I think another mistake painters will make when they want to switch from residential into commercial or, whether that's repaint or new construction being different, is they kind of aren't, they're saying, "Hey, well, we're just going to offer this as well." But
Right.
if you start mixing and matching those processes, you're going to run into kind of a lot of issues. Whereas if you say, hey, right off the bat, this is essentially almost a new business. We're going to use our existing resources and knowledge base, but we're going to essentially create a new division, new line of business over here. It's far more palatable. And maybe you don't want that line of business, but you're doing essentially a beta test right now.
That's right. That is exactly right. Because we could go that direction and launch that new line of business, or we could look at the cities around us and say, hey, this one's only 30 minutes away. This one's 45 minutes
Sure.
away. What if we just pop either a hybrid person that can sell and produce, or two people, one salesman, one project manager, and we go hard marketing in that area and try to really expand our reach into that area. So there's in that, of course, I'm speaking residentially at that point. So there's a couple different avenues that we could go, and our team's aware of that, and we're kind of trying to grow strategically, to grow right, to grow wisely now, and just kind of see which one of those makes sense. Maybe it's both, probably not right away,
Sure.
want to kill ourselves, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that I'm pretty convinced of, Brandon. I don't know how people think of money in all kind of different ways. To me, money is just a scoreboard. So our revenue, our gross profit, our net profit, all those fun things, they're just scoreboards, and I like to win. I don't know if I live differently if I make, $100,000 a year or $1 million a year. I don't know that my life is going to look any differently. Um, because I don't actually, we have those months that are really good. It's not like I'm sitting there, oh, let me go spend or let me go do or let me go buy. But I I love what some of those numbers represent is our reach into the community. The more revenue we have, the more reach we have into the community, right? but we need to do it in a healthy way, and we need to grow in a healthy way. And I need to think about our people and how we're managing that revenue. And
Yeah.
so, um, I don't we don't really have numerical targets. Like I said, our goal this year was 1.2 and saying, let's don't really grow. Let's just get really healthy. Well, we've been able to actually get healthier and grow, which is great. That's awesome. We'll take that every time, but we're not going to do growth at the expense of health.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Done that before, and it crushed me and a lot of people around me. So we're not doing that.
I want to add, I want to add kind of a third option too for people listening. So you talked about expanding geographically, so going to surrounding cities. We talked about creating a new division, new line of business with the new
Right.
construction commercial. I think a lot of painting companies also will very much undervalue the amount of work that is in their current service area. And so
Agree.
I've had, I mean, it's, a company doing 500,000 with a population of 800,000 saying they think they've tapped out. I mean,
Wow.
you could run a, I mean, quite frankly, you could run a $30 million plus company with that size of a population. You truly could. And if you
Yeah.
look at Paris Painting, you look at some of these companies that the size that they're at and their population will kind of prove that to you. So I want people listening too. They'll feel like they reach some kind of a cap. There's this theory of constraints. Alex Hormozy talks a lot about it. He's
Mm.
a thought leader I follow in marketing. I've talked about him a lot, but he talks about the theory of constraints. He's really big into that. So when your business is not growing, or maybe it's growing slowly or stagnant, there's something that's keeping you back, whether that's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's your product line. Rarely is that, whether it's your ops, right? You can't fulfill whatever it is. And I think for the majority of painting contractors, I think it is their marketing. I think it is their sales and their marketing. I think it's hamstrung, and I think we put these, and I've been guilty of it as well, absolutely 100%. But I think we put these glass ceilings when we
Yes.
say, "Hey, I think I've tapped out." Well, maybe you've tapped out your ability. It doesn't mean you've tapped out the total addressable market.
Yes. I couldn't agree with that more. And that's actually the conversation we're having internally right now. And so we just decided to, I mean, we're really for the first time doing marketing. I mean, Hannah's had plans, but we haven't been able to handle the volume. So
Yeah,
we're just like, we can't market because we can't handle what's coming in now. But now with the hybrid model, with more subcontractors on board, we can handle it. So let's actually go for it in our area. And I was guilty of thinking that with the cabinets. I thought, well, we just want to create an entire cabinet refinishing division, which basically we've unintentionally done, then, but if we want to go further and let's say we build a shop and we're just, boom, we're hiring four W-2s and all they're doing is cabinets, to say, I don't know if that's possible. Well, Corey Leister does it in the same size area as us,
yeah.
right? Because that's what she markets for. And so it just hit me. It's like that. I had the one thought and then I had the other thought that just smacked me right in the face and said, that's pretty stupid. And that's limited.
So
So
blunt. I love it.
I agree with what you're saying. I think that makes complete sense. And yeah, we don't have to do any of those things that I talked about in the near term. It could just be a way to do an and. Like we are going to do
Yeah.
everything you just said, particularly with targeting certain neighborhoods in our community. And we've got this plan in the next 8 months to hit them multiple times. And so for the first time, say we're going to go after neighborhoods where we have a lot of influence already, and we're just going to go after it and see what happens.
Love
And
it.
so yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Love it, man. So you're gonna focus on refining, systematizing the sales process, bringing in another estimator, replacing yourself, eventually building a team. We've talked about potentially exploring this new division, new line of business, potentially exploring geographical expansion as well as more focused marketing, and sounds like some hyper local marketing in terms of owning certain neighborhoods that
Right.
are really your ideal customer avatar. Is there anything else that we should cover regarding your future vision?
No, I think just, I mean, like I said, it's healthy growth is a huge thing for us, huge. So I think that underlies everything that, you just said. And that comes from experience of doing it the opposite way
Love it.
and the pain of that. So
That quote, what is the quote? What does it benefit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Something like that.
that's scripture. Yeah.
Yeah, that always comes to my mind. I think so often as entrepreneurs, we sacrifice our health, we sacrifice our family life, we sacrifice our marriage, our relationship with our kids, we sacrifice our personal happiness because we're so focused on growing something. And I do believe in seasons of life. I believe at times, sometimes you have to just stick it out. I don't think everything's perfect at all times, but I think hard driving, you talked a lot about wanting to win. I think hard driving entrepreneurs, myself included, I've certainly been guilty of this. we'll kind of stick it out too long, right? We
Right.
don't need to stick it out, but we think we need to or we want to, and it does hurt you and it hurts the people around you. So I think that concept of healthy growth is a really important one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a very good observation.
Shane, you always make me feel good about myself. I appreciate you. Thinking about having another episode just so it can make me feel good.
There we
Um,
go. Here for you.
right? You're a giver, man, servant leader. Brother, I appreciate this. This has been a phenomenal podcast series. You've opened up a lot. You've shared a lot. I thank you for that. Is there anything as we wrap up, not just this episode, but the complete series, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I've appreciated the time as well. And it's given me, I was just sharing with a friend the other day, it's made me think a lot about where we are. And I'm grateful for that self-reflection that you give me. So I appreciate it.
Love that. Shane, thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast. Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.